Flight Dreams, a Mark Manning mystery, Book 1. Author, Michael Kraft. Publisher, Open Road Integrated Media, New York. Narrator, Eric Ost. Thursday, October 1st. I see trees. The hushed voice speaks slowly through the phone. I see a large house surrounded by trees. Mark Manning laughs, confident that there is no need to take notes. He caps his pet pen, an antique Mont Blanc. I fail to see what's so funny, Mr. Manning. The voice is indignant. I'm only trying to help. This information could be useful to your stories. Sorry, Manning says indifferently. But it's a safe guess that any wealthy person would live in a big house, and most houses have trees around them. He closes his notepad and adds it to the tidy clutter on his desk in the newsroom of the Chicago Journal. But I see these things so clearly, the voice persists. With a little help from you, Mr. Manning, we could find her body. She is dead, then. Do you see that? He stares at his computer terminal, transfixed for a moment by the rhythmic winking of its cursor. Well, certainly, the voice responds as if cluing in an ignorant child. Everyone knows that, Mr. Manning. It's common knowledge. Thanks for calling, said Manning, bringing the conversation to an abrupt close. I'm on deadline right now and can't talk any longer. He hears a little squawk from the receiver as he tosses it back on top of the phone. He lights a cigarette with a small brass lighter that he flicks, extinguishes, and returns in a single motion to the pocket of a crisp blue Oxford cloth shirt. Hey, handsome, deadline was nearly an hour ago, says a taunting voice from behind. Daryl, a copy kid, overheard the end of Manning's call and now sidles into the reporter's cubicle. With an easy familiarity, he perches on the desk and asks, How many does that make? 3 this morning, says Manning, disgruntled. He rolls his chair back from the desk, loosens his tie, and unbuttons his collar. Every time my byline appears, anything pertaining to Helena Carter, I get a flurry of calls from these damned mystics. He tosses up a leg and plops his foot next to the computer. Reflections from a fluorescent work lamp glisten as wavy bands in the polished cardigan of his shoe. Then why'd you write it? Asked the college intern, fanning his hands in disapproval of the cigarette smoke. He flares his nostrils, exaggerating the demure negroid features that are sometimes the subject of his coy patter. Because today is October 1st. In 3 months, the estate will be settled, unless she reappears before then. She can't very well reappear from the grave, can she? Asked Daryl, scrutinizing a hangnail at arm's length. Of course not, but I don't think she's dead. I think she disappeared of her own free will. Sure, Mark. The old gal could have run away for lots of reasons. Maybe she's just a screwy. Daryl swirls a finger at his temple. Isn't it more likely, though, that she's been killed? There was no motive to kill her. $100 million isn't a motive? Look, Dial, I'm the first to concede that you know more about this case than anyone else does. You've been on this story from the start, and there isn't a paper in the country that hasn't picked up your stuff, byline and all. What about the Post? Manning quips. I stand corrected. The tabloid across the street has not run your byline. But then they've got Humphrey Hastings, and he's writing exactly the kind of sensational fluff they're famous for. But you, Mark, are the expert. My God, how many reporters get calls from a chief detective asking for clarification of details of his own case? So I bow to your expertise. Does that please you? Manning answers with a shrug. He plants the cigarette in the corner of his mouth and joins his hand behind his head, stretching lithely. His is not the body of most 39-year-olds, lean and muscled. He's in better shape than most at 25. The well-defined planes of his face hint at the precise workings of an analytical mind, as if made visible through the piercing clarity of uncommonly green eyes. His hair, now peppered with those first dashes of gray, is worn a bit short for the fashion of the day, imparting a military attractiveness to his bearing, an impression made all the more vivid by the pleated khaki slacks he always wears. Darrell crosses his arms, preparing to rest his case. So, how can you say, knowing everything you know, that $100 million is not sufficient motive for murder? Reaching to flick the ash of his cigarette, Manning sits forward in his chair with a sigh that seems to say, "All right, I'll explain this just once." Helena Carter's will was located without difficulty shortly after she disappeared. It took some doing for a flock of interested parties to persuade the courts to open the will of someone not known to be dead. But it was indeed opened, primarily for any light it might shed on motives for murder. All that was learned, though, is that the document simply does not raise any suspicions or point to any suspects. But Mark, the old girl must have been crackers. No one in his right mind leaves that kind of fortune to be split between an animal pound and a church. Not a pound. Darrell, it's a federation of cat clubs. Carter was a cat lady. She bred them. She was also a devout Catholic. The stipulations of her were well thought out, and she employed top legal talent to implement them. She was no madwoman. She never had kids, but saw to it that her one surviving sister would be cared for by means of carefully constructed trust. Yes, she decided that the bulk of her legacy would be used to endow organizations that were significant to her. But I don't think that's crazy. Look, Mark, it doesn't matter if she was nuts or not. Point is, whoever murdered her obviously didn't know what was in the will. He apparently thought there might be something in it for himself. Who? I don't know. How about the houseman that Hastings and the Post keep harping on? Darrell, people can fry for knocking off little old ladies. And if that lady happens to be sole heir to a highly profitable airline, representing one of the fattest fortunes to grace the North Shore suburbs of Chicago, you can bet that the effort to find and fry the culprit will be intense. Why would anyone choose to jeopardize the contented fulfillment of his twilight years on the mere hunch that it might be worth his while? Would you? Of course not, but I'm not a murderer. Such people do exist, though, and they're not all as logical as you. Maybe the guy's dumb. It just seems that Helena Carter was murdered. Manning tells him, "You don't seem to have produced a body. You don't seem to have come up with a suspect or even a reasonable motive. On the basis of what I do know, not what I think or believe, or would like to believe, but know, I'm convinced that Helena Carter is alive." "If you could prove it, you'd be $500,000 richer," Darrell reminds him. "And I know just the man you could spend it on." Manning ignores Darrell's come on, telling him, "The reward isn't the only consideration. If I could prove that Helena Carter is alive, there'd be a partridge prize waiting for me next year." "The coveted brass bird," Darrell waxes rhapsodic. "Investigative journalism's highest reward." Then he beads Manning with a get-real stare. "If you could prove that she's alive." They are silent. Both have stated their positions, and it is clear that no convincing has been done. Darrell enjoys these encounters. He and Manning often engage in such manner, and the cagey sparring implies a sort of intimacy. It is not a physical intimacy, though. Darrell has made it plain enough he would welcome the possibility, but simply a professional closeness. Darrell is a journalism student at Northwestern, and in spite of his flighty manner, is committed to making a career of it. He sees Manning as the journal's star reporter and constantly seeks ways to prove his own potential. The efforts have not gone unnoticed by Manning, who encourages the kid and treats him more like an equal than a gopher. In moments of honest introspection, Manning also recognizes that Darrell intrigues him. While he feels no particular attraction to Daryl, he admires the young man's openness. 39 and still single, Manny wonders for a moment whether his next birthday might trigger something he doesn't care to face. Suppressing these thoughts, he curls his lip into a little smile. Well, enough of that. Daryl mirrors Manning's smile. He asks, how old was she? Is she? She just turned 56, says Manny. She was 49 when she disappeared, a young widow. But most people think of her as elderly. Yes, it fits the image of a rich North Shore matron. Everything I've learned about her, though, paints a picture of a spry, spirited woman. Daryl checks his watch and affects a lisp. Speaking of spry and spirited, you'd better get your ass in gear. Gordon wanted to see you 10 minutes ago. Gordon Smith, the Journal's managing editor, is not a man to be kept waiting. Manning sits bolt upright and snuffs out his cigarette, asking, why the hell did you say so? Well, I did. Just now. Manning's already shrugged into his jacket. He tightens his tie as he trots down the aisle toward the newsroom's front offices. The Journal's previous managing editor opted for a late retirement. It was general consensus that he waited too long. Gordon Smith, as city editor, was heir apparent, so when the promotion finally came, it surprised no one. Smith has accepted the mantle of authority gracefully, but with little inner joy. Some years earlier, when he became city editor, he yearned for the creative involvement of a reporter. Reporting is what newspaper work is all about, he confided to his wife when she wondered aloud one night why his success had brought on a mild despondency. Now that he is managing editor, he misses the duties of city editor, and reporting seems all the more removed from his life. Nonetheless, he enjoys playing the role in which he now finds himself cast. He has acquired a wardrobe of three-piece suits, which he wears at all times. Arriving at his Journal office, he hangs up his jacket, unbuttons his vest, and rolls up the sleeves of his starched white shirt. He has become the picture of a working editor, and once joked to Manning that he planned to get suspenders and arm garters. When Manning enters Smith's office, though, he senses at once that there will be no joking today. The editor sits peering at a blank computer screen. His expression is sullen, his complexion ashen. What's the matter, Gordon? Manning asks him, foregoing any small talk. You know, Mark, it's funny. Smith vacantly motions for Manning to sit down. His gaze wanders out the window to the cool autumn sky arching over Lake Michigan. You'd think it would be enough for a man to sit in his tower office, secure in the knowledge that he presides over the most respected news organization in the Midwest, leaving day-to-day reporting and editorial matters to the best staff in the business. Smith's voice, barely audible, trails off to nothing as he continues to study the sky. Are you talking about Nathan Kane? Asks Manning, referring to the Journal's publisher. Who else? Smith turns in his chair to face Manning across the desk. Nathan has more drive and vision than any newsman I know. And when he set up our foreign bureau in Ethiopia, lots of folks laughed at the idea, but now they're picking up our wire stories covering the hostage crisis there. Say what you will about him, but Nathan is a big picture kind of guy. You'll get no argument from me. The Journal has never been stronger than it is right now, with Kane at the helm. Hell, he is the Journal. Exactly, says the editor at last, looking Manning in the eye. And that's what makes all of this so sticky? Apprehension colors Manning's voice. All of what, Gordon? All of this business about the Carter woman. You've once again drawn the conclusion in print that she's alive, while the rest of the world seems convinced that she was murdered. Nathan feels that your position is an embarrassment to the paper. He must be taking some heat from his buddies. What buddies? Who knows? Probably the guys he rubs elbows with at United Way board meetings. Isn't Josh Williams on that board? Ah, yes, says Manning. Josh Williams, publisher of the Post, happens to be married to Humphrey Hastings' sister. Bingo. Smith swallows hard, then exhales before continuing. Whatever the reason, Nathan wants the Journal to fall in line. He wants you to reverse your position. I can't do that. Gordon, Mark, I agree with you. I told him so, but he's made up his mind. For God's sake, says Manning, exasperated. Why don't you just edit my stories to fit whatever policy he wants? Oh, why not indeed? I could simply assign the story to someone else. I suggested that to Nathan, but he wouldn't hear of it. He's always had that odd streak. He prefers sense of gaming. He insists that the turnaround come from you personally. He can't force me to write something I don't believe. Of course not. But he can and did issue an ultimatum. Nathan Kane told me this morning that you are to reverse your Carter position in the next edition. If you don't, and if Carter doesn't reappear by New Year's, you're out of here. To make his wishes all the more compelling, he threatened that you'd never find work at another paper. As you're well aware, he has the power to make good on that promise. But why? Asked Manning. What's behind his sudden interest in this story? Nathan Kane doesn't strike me as the sort of man who'd lose sleep over a bit of razzing from his colleagues. I don't have any answers, Smith tells him with a frustrated shrug. Yes, Nathan's orders seem groundless, and I tried to dissuade him. But my opinions don't count. Not this time. I'm just an overpaid messenger, and the message is, he calls the shots. Stunned, Manning mumbles. My entire adult life I've struggled to build a reputation based on reason and integrity. Smith doesn't mince words. Integrity isn't worth shit if you wind up losing your job. A job you're supposedly good at. Manning thinks for a moment, but only a moment before asking. He doesn't leave me much choice, does he? No, he doesn't. Then I'd better get to work and find Helena Carter. Manning rises to leave, but pauses. With a feeble smile, he turns to ask his editor, did you think I'd knuckle under? I hope not, but I didn't know. Kane was sure you'd give in, but the ultimatum is no bluff. Having taken up the gauntlet, you've got to deliver. I know that. Gordon, I'll try not to disappoint you. Good luck, Mark. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.